My guest is Charles Willeford, a writer of bleak existential crime novels.
"I'm going to kill you," he said through his clenched teeth. "Both of you." "I don't blame you," I answered calmly. I felt no fear or anxiety at all, just a morbid feeling of detachment.
That morbid feeling of detachment recurs in Willeford's early novels. The reading is from Willeford's book Pickup, which he wrote in the 1950s, shortly before retiring from the military. Back then, it was hard to get his books published, and most of them ended up getting brought out as pulps. Now Willeford's early books are being read in a new light. Black Lizard Press reissued Pickup, The Burnt Orange Heresy, and Cockfighter. Research Arts has resurrected his first novels, High Priest of California and Wild Wives. Literary acclaim for these new editions coincides with the publication of his current series of crime novels, set in Miami, featuring police detective Hoke Mosley. Well, when we left the main characters of Pickup, Harry and Helen, they were facing a man who was waving a pistol and threatening to kill them. The would-be killer backs down, and Helen says,
"Did you feel sorry for him, Harry?" "I did," Helen said. "Yes, I did," I replied sincerely, "the poor bastard. I don't believe I'd have really cared if he killed us both." Helen's voice was reflective, somber. "Cared?" I forced a tight smile. "It would have been a favor."
I have to tell you, when I read that for the first time, it was so bleak. I found myself laughing. Was that an inappropriate response?
Yeah, well, this is a novel of despair. And they've both lost already before the book starts. And they can only go down from there.
You know, in your latest book, Sideswipe, the book opens with a quotation that says, "Life is an effort that deserves a better cause." Do you think that bleakness and indifference to life, despair, is a theme that runs through many of your books?
Well, usually, yes, but I think there's enough humor with it to alleviate it. Although I have had people say after they finished Pickup they wanted to cut their wrists, but I said, well, you know, a lot of people like this kind of thing, and people like to read about people who are worse off than they are.
I guess that's true. You've had a pretty extraordinary life, and I'm sure that the things that have happened during your life have shaped your writing. You were orphaned when you were 8 years old. Your parents, I believe, died of tuberculosis.
Yes.
You went to live with your grandmother, and at 15 you became a hobo. How come?
Well, things were pretty tight. After my grandmother lost her job, my uncle, her son, had to support her, and he was married with 3 children, and I was kind of, I had to do something, and he couldn't very well support me, and I was too young to work, so I went on the road.
Did you have to learn how to talk a good game in order to stay alive when you were on the road?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, you get to be pretty glib.
Did that help you in your writing, do you think?
Well, yes, but I read a lot, too. I always read a lot, Even when I was going to school, I used to read a book a day just about.
In your novel, Pickup, the characters basically live for the next bottle of alcohol, the next cigarette, the next cup of coffee. Did you meet up with characters like that or feel that you were becoming that way yourself when you were a hobo?
No. I was always optimistic, and I always had some goal of some kind, even if the goal was getting to someplace else. I had a destination in mind. A guy told me that. He says, you always want to have a destination in mind. If you don't, you'll drift. And he says, when you get to that destination, he says, pick out another one and go immediately to that. He says, then you that way you won't get into despair and drift.
That's really interesting advice.
Mm-hmm. It is good advice.
Now, at age 16, you lied about your age and you enlisted. How come?
Well, it was a way out, and I figured the Army was the best place for me to go. I'd come back home, and the situation hadn't changed any. And I was big for my age, and I was able to get in, so I went in. And it was probably the best thing I could have done at the time. The Depression was still on. There was no place for a 16-year-old boy in civilian life.
I still get, I have this impression of you that you're someone who was really, born to be a bohemian who ended up in the military.
Yeah, well, you do what you have to do, And I kind of liked the Army anyway. I kind of liked it.
What'd you like about it?
Well, I like the trade. I like the weapons, and I like playing soldier, and I like fighting in the war. And I always felt that I had a charmed life, and I never get hit. But I did. I got wounded a couple of times anyway, but not bad.
You started writing novels while you were still in the military, right?
Yes, I did. I was still in the Air Force and had written some short stories, and I'd always wanted to write a novel. And I used to keep saying, I'm going to write a novel. And my roommate finally said, you're never going to write a novel. So that's when I did. I was up at Hamilton Air Force Base, and I used to go into San Francisco on the weekends and rent a hotel room, the Hotel Powell there, and started on this novel, and I finally finished it, on the weekends.
When did you decide to leave the military?
When I leave the military?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. I just retired. I stayed in for 20 years. As a tank commander, I didn't have any other particular trade, so I decided to stay in.
Well, except for writing.
Well, except for writing, but, that was an iffy thing, and it was a kind of a way to supplement your income occasionally, but to write full-time and support yourself is a tough proposition in this country.
When did you actually reach that point of being able to support yourself on your writing?
Oh, about by 1982, I've been able to support myself.
And that's when you were writing the Hoke Mosley detective novel.
Yeah, the Detective Mosley series has kind of taken off now. There's been 3, Miami Blues, New Hope for the Dead, and Sideswipe. Sideswipe's coming out in paperback soon. And then there's a 4th novel coming out in April from Random House called The Way We Die Now. And Hoke Mosley's pretty popular.
For the past few years, all of your novels have been about Detective Hoke Mosley. Why did you want to do a detective series that had a recurring character in it?
Well, what I wanted to do, I wanted to write about a detective. I didn't want to do a private eye. And I kind of made up my own Miami police force and my own homicide thing. And then I wrote a long biography of Hoke Mosley. I know everything about him, where he's from and his first kiss and his grades in school and everything else. I did a lot of background to invent this character. And then after I finished the first novel with him, I said, well, I might as well continue on and write another one because I have all this information. You see, all I need is another plot.
Which of the characters that you've created for your novels is closest to you?
I hope that none of them are close to me.
Because they're all crazy.
Yeah. I think that my autobiography there is something about a soldier. That's me. That's the way I was. But in the characterizations of my heroes and villains and so on in my novels, I don't think I have any of their characteristics. They're invented, created characters.
Well, one last thing. In a lot of your novels, you're interested in people who are sociopaths, who are crazy, and who operate by this really strict set of logic, but the logic is nuts, Mm-hmm. Why are you interested in characters like that?
Well, I was told back in 1958, I was in a writer's class, and I was told that it's impossible to make a crazy person sympathetic, so don't ever do that. And I went home and I thought about it. I said, well, that's not impossible. I can make a sympathetic character out of a crazy person. And so I wrote this short story, The Machine Wore 11, about a movie director who was crazy, who ended up killing his psychiatrist. And he was sympathetic. And I sent the story into Playboy, and they bought it for $3,000. And he was a sympathetic character, and that gave me the idea. Well, I realized that it's the crazy people in this world who do anything anyway. It makes life exciting, and people want to read about them because their lives are so dull.
Well, Charles Willeford, I want to thank you very much for talking with us.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Charles Willeford's 3 Hoke Mosley detective novels are Miami Blues, New Hope for the Dead, and Sideswipe.